Hey, what is up guys? My name is Oleg, this is Bond. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to do a full review of a Cimier 1950s vintage chronograph. If you're following the channel for a while, you know that I bought this watch a few months ago off of eBay. I just haven't done a review yet. In fact, I haven't reviewed any vintage watches in a while, which should be a crime because I love vintage watches. So let's get into the review of this watch and let me tell you some of the things that I noticed about it through my usage over the last few months. My 1950s Cimier chronograph. Let's start the review, as always, by looking at the basic dimensions of the case. We have a diameter of 38 millimeters, a lug-to-lug width of 46.5 millimeters, a lug width of 19 millimeters, and the thickness of almost 13 millimeters. A lot of that does come from this plastic domed crystal. So the watch is not wound yet. Let me wind it on camera because I really wanted you to hear what it sounds like when you wind this timepiece. Doesn't it just sound amazing? I did get this watch serviced, as I mentioned, and it only cost me 30 Canadian dollars to service, which is like $25, $23 US. Incredibly cheap, incredibly affordable. Now you might be wondering, why was it so cheap to service? And also, did I service it myself? Like, what the hell's going on? Well, let me give you some background on these Cimier simple chronograph movements. First of all, be very careful when you buy one of these watches online, because a lot of them are not actual chronographs. A lot of them are what's called a chronostop watches. Now, the big difference between a chronograph and a chronostop is the fact that the chronograph, you can start like this, and you can also stop and reset back to zero. With the chronostop watch, all you can do is just start and stop the movement. So the whole movement starts and stops. It's not a separate function. And some people like that, some people don't like that. The problem with that is the fact that the chronostop function is pretty much useless in a modern life because you can't really use it to time things. It's just kind of a gimmick to have. I actually have one of the chronostop watches in my collection. Maybe I'll do a video about that watch at some point in the future if you guys want to see what that looks like. So anyways, so be very careful that you don't buy a chronostop watch instead of a chronograph. So this Cimier chronograph, to be honest, not much to review because it's just a very, very simple basic watch with a very basic and simple movement. It's a pin style chronograph movement, and to be honest, a lot of watchmakers wouldn't even want to service this movement. For example, my main watchmaker, the one that services all my kind of more expensive watches, so to say, he wouldn't even want to service this movement because he says these movements aren't meant to have been serviced. So I have a few different watchmakers that I go to. I go to kind of my B grade, so to speak, watchmaker, not in terms of the quality of his work, but in terms of the kind of watches that I would bring to him, and he serviced this watch no problem. But these movements, these watches aren't really meant to have been serviced. When they were created, they were meant to use it for a little bit and throw it out instead of having it actually serviced. But just look at this dial, just look at the style of this watch. It would be a shame to just throw it away. Let's pause it. So you actually pause with the top pusher and you stop and start with the bottom pusher, and let's reset it back to zero. And as you can see, it resets perfectly to zero. Another word of warning about these vintage chronographs: you always want to reset them as close to let's say 5-second mark and the 55-second mark as possible, because you don't want this seconds hand to travel too much. One of the common things that happens is the pinion cracks. That's because again, cheap movements. So when the seconds hand travels all the way, let's say from 30 to 0, it snaps a little bit too hard and cracks the pinion, and that's an incredibly difficult part to find. This watch became one of my favorite watches in the collection, based on its looks and also based on its simplicity and its purpose. So first of all, let's talk about the looks. I mean, it looks incredible. Applied indices, even kind of the cutouts, you can see half of the 8 is cut out to make room for this subdial. I love the set of hands on this watch. I love the tachymeter and the telemeter, and these tools were actually really useful. They were really functional tools in 1950s, these were kind of the smartphones of their time, and that's why I love these simple, basic chronograph watches. First of all, they're inexpensive. Second of all, they're inexpensive to maintain, and third of all, they were truly tool watches. These were the common man watches that people used in everyday life, and after they were done with them, they were affordable watches. You just threw them away. And now they kind of dictate a bit of a premium price over what they were selling for back in the day, because so few of them actually survived in a good condition. I mean, the condition of this one is really good. I would rate it as a 9 out of 10. I know it has a lot of scratches. I know it has a lot of wear on the case, but you have to keep in mind that this watch is almost 70 years old, and it's been on this earth for way longer than I have. It has kind of a plastic crystal, and these crystals are usually very scratched up or cracked. This one survived all that time in a pretty much perfect condition, so that is very impressive. The movement is preserved really well, so I think I got really lucky with this watch. One simple negative that I have with these vintage chronographs, not this one specifically, but this one is also in that category, is the fact that these lugs are only 19 millimeters wide, and it makes it harder to find perfectly fitting straps. This strap is 20 millimeters, so I had to kind of squeeze it in there. It did fit, but just keep that in mind. Not easy to find straps for these vintage chronographs. Another simple complaint that I have about the watch is the fact that the movement is a bit too loud. Just have a listen. Yeah, you can really hear it. If it's beside you on the nightstand, you will be able to hear it at night. And the third complaint, it's not really a complaint, but again, something that you have to keep in mind with these vintage chronographs is the fact that they don't have much water resistance, or I should say any water resistance whatsoever. So even simple things like washing your hands, you have to be extremely careful, because pretty much there's no gaskets on this crystal, this plastic piece of crystal here. So water can easily travel into the case and into the movement, damage the dial, damage the movement, and you have to throw the watch away pretty much. So you have to be very careful if it's raining outside, if you're washing your hands, to keep this watch preserved in a good condition. And finally, here's what the watch looks like on my 7¼ inch wrist. As you can see, it fits really well. It fits large because it's 38 millimeters, so it almost fits like a modern day chronograph. 38 millimeters for a vintage watch is really extra large if you think about it. Alright guys, so that was the review of my vintage 1950s Cimier chronograph. I think I got really lucky with this one. The condition and the fact that the movement actually works properly. Word of advice for you, be extra careful when you buy these vintage watches, especially vintage chronographs, because you never know what you're gonna get once you open that case back. I appreciate you watching this video until the end. Please leave a comment in the comment section below. Let me know what you think about this vintage Cimier chronograph, and if you have any vintage chronographs in your collection, or if you're looking to add some in the future. By the way, today on my wrist, I'm wearing my Phoebus Sentinel. I did an unboxing of this watch. Still haven't done a review. That's to come in the future. Of course, subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss that video. Also, in the description of this video, there is a secret link. Check it out if you're curious. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you had fun, and I will see you guys next time.